By 1944, infantry combat had become a question of systems. On the Western Front, along the frozen ridgeal lines of the Enies, they won or lost because of everything their army could place in their hands, sustain under pressure, and replace when it was lost. This list ranks 10 national infantry loadouts by firepower and logistics, doctrinal flexibility, production depth, and the capacity to keep fighting when everything starts to break. In the mountains of Tunisia and along the defensive lines of Sicily in 1943, Italian infantry faced a structural problem no individual soldier could solve. Their weapons worked, but their factories could not keep pace. The Italian loadout was built around quality it could never deliver at scale. The standard service rifle was the Carano Modello 91 chambered, in 6.5 meter, a bolt action with a fixed 6-round end block clip. Accurate and suited to mountainous terrain, but underpowered by mid-war standards with a clip system that slowed reloading under fire. The WWII served as the squad automatic weapon feeding from a 10-round stripper clip loaded from the receiver's right side. A design so fragile and prone to field contamination that frontline units documented consistent failures. Italy fielded the Beretta M38 submachine gun, accurate and controllable, but too expensive and slow to produce in numbers sufficient to reshape tactical doctrine. Ammunition standardization was adequate at the squad level, but inconsistent across theaters. Production capacity was critically limited by industrial infrastructure never modernized to wartime requirements. Where Italian infantry held disciplined defensive positions with pre-sighted weapons and intact resupply, the system functioned. Mountain warfare suited its rifle doctrine, and the M38 gave assault elements genuine close-quarters capability when available. The WWII's feed system was the single greatest structural failure in any loadout on this list. A squad automatic weapon requiring rounds to be manually replenished from stripper clips under combat stress could not sustain suppressive fire when it was most needed. That failure cascaded through every contact engagement. Italy ranks 10th because its only world-class component could not be produced in numbers sufficient to compensate for everything else that failed around it. The nation above it shares Italy's production constraints but confronted them differently. Number 9. Hungary doctrine without the depth to sustain it, along the Don River. In the winter of 1942 to 1943, Hungarian Second Army divisions held exposed flanks that Soviet forces systematically dismantled. The infantry arrived adequately armed. They did not arrive adequately supported. The Hungarian infantry loadout was structurally coherent, but dependent on German supply relationships, which it could not control. Hungary's standard service rifle was the Mennlicher 35M, chambered in 8x 56 mm, a turnbolt with a 5-round fixed magazine, reliable and well-manufactured, but the caliber was non-standard relative to German allies, creating logistical complications that worsened as the war progressed. The Solothurn 31M served as the primary light machine gun, a licensed Swiss design with respectable rates of fire, but dependent on magazines that proved difficult to maintain in field conditions. Submachine gun availability was limited. The Denovia 39M was issued in modest numbers, a competent 9mm weapon, but never distributed at the density needed to alter squad firepower ratios. Hungary's industrial output maintained consistent quality through the early war years. The Mannlicher was a well-engineered service rifle, and the Solothurn's accuracy gave squad automatic elements real capability at medium range. Hungary's equipment was manufactured to consistent standards and performed reliably where it was employed. Non-standard caliber in a coalition war is a structural liability that compounds with every logistical disruption. When German resupply faltered on the Eastern Front, Hungarian units faced ammunition shortfalls that independently supplied armies did not. Hungary ranks 9th because its loadout functioned as designed, but was structurally tethered to an ally whose own logistics were deteriorating. At number 8, a nation with complete logistical independence paid for that independence with different costs entirely. Number 8, Japan. Firepower doctrine built for a war that changed beneath it. In the jungle fighting of Guadalcanal in late 1942, Japanese infantry engaged American units at ranges where marksmanship discipline should have produced results. The fighting shifted almost immediately toward volumes of close-range fire that Japanese loadout design had not prioritized. The Japanese infantry loadout was built for a doctrine the Pacific War rendered obsolete. The Arisaka Type 38 chambered in 6.5 mm was the standard service rifle. A 5-round bolt action well manufactured with a long barrel producing good muzzle velocity at range. The heavier Type 99 in 7.7 mm entered widespread service from 1940 onward, improving terminal performance. The Type 96 and Type 9999 light machine guns provided squad automatic capability through 30-round top-mounted magazines with rates of fire adequate for the suppression doctrine Japan employed. Submachine gun presence was minimal. The Type 100 was produced in limited numbers and never integrated at squad level systematically. Japanese industry was self-contained and sustained early campaigns adequately. Marksmanship training was thorough throughout. Japanese soldiers were among the most disciplined individual riflemen of the war. Accuracy and controlled defensive engagements was documented consistently by Allied after-action reports. And the Type 99's improved ballistics addressed earlier caliber limitations. The near-total absence of submachine gun capability at the squad level meant that as Pacific fighting increasingly occurred at close range and bunker networks, in night attacks, in jungle undergrowth, the loadout could not generate the volume of close-quarters fire the environment demanded. Japan ranks 8th because its loadout was optimized for a war of accurate rifle fire and found itself conducting a war of close-range volume. Britain, at number 7, shared those doctrinal roots and had begun correcting them. Before we move higher up the list, which nation do you think deserves number 1? The United States, Germany, or someone else entirely? Number 7, Britain. The system that grew into the war in the Hedge of Normandy in the summer of 1944. British infantry sections operated with a loadout reflecting 3 years of hard adaptation. The weapons were not always the most modern, but the system behind them had become one of the most coherent in any Western army. The British Infantry Loadout was a war-revised system, balancing individual rifle capability with squad-level firepower. The Lee Enfield No. 4 Mark I, chambered in 303 British, was the standard service rifle with a 10-round detachable box magazine, a smooth rear-locking bolt, and a practical rate of fire that trained soldiers could sustain beyond any comparable bolt action in service. The Bren light machine gun using the same cartridge and a 30-round curved magazine gave the section its primary automatic capability, accurate and controllable at both suppression and precision fire ranges. The Sten submachine gun chambered in 9 mm provided close-quarters volume at a manufacturing cost so low that British industry produced over 4 million. Ammunition standardization between the Lee Enfield and the Bren simplified logistics at every level. The Lee Enfield and Bren combination represented mature structural competence. The rifle's unmatched manual rate of fire compensating for its bolt action mechanism, while the Bren's accuracy made it more than a suppressive weapon. Commonwealth logistics reinforced British formation substantially through the mid-war period. Sten reliability under field conditions was a recurring concern documented across multiple theaters. Its open-bolt blowback design was susceptible to accidental discharge and to feed failures in sandy or dirty conditions. As a close-quarters weapon, it was one that soldiers frequently distrusted. Britain ranks 7th because Sten reliability issues and residual doctrinal conservatism kept it below the fully integrated loadouts above. Finland, at number 6, achieved remarkable results with structurally inferior resources, and that distinction matters. Number 6. Finland. The most efficient infantry system per soldier. Along the Karelian Isthmus, in the Winter War of 1939 to 1940, Finnish infantry routinely disrupted Soviet formations, many times their numerical strength. The explanation was not miraculous. It was structural. Specific weapons married to terrain knowledge and doctrine that compensated precisely for what Finnish industry could not provide. The Finnish infantry loadout was optimized to a degree no other nation achieved within the hard limits of a small industrial economy. The Mosin Nagant served as the standard Finnish service rifle, captured, manufactured, and modified from Soviet stocks and indigenous production in 7.62x, 62x, 54mm. Finnish manufactured variants demonstrated consistently higher quality control than Soviet equivalents. The Latte Saloranta M26 served as the light machine gun, complex, expensive, and produced in insufficient numbers. The defining component was the Swami KP-31 chambered in 9mm fed from a 71-round drum, or 50-round coffin magazine with a cyclic rate exceeding 900 rounds per minute. At close quarters in forested terrain, it was among the most effective submachine guns of its class in the war. Its influence on the Soviet PPSH design is historically documented. Finnish soldiers maximized every component of their loadout through intense training and terrain integration that converted structural limits into tactical advantages. The KP-31's combat record made it one of the most studied submachine guns of the war. Industrial capacity constrained the Finnish system absolutely. The Lahti Sailor was never produced at the density Finland's own engagements demonstrated was necessary. Replacement capacity for any component was limited in ways no major industrial power faced. Finland ranks 6th because its per-soldier loadout was extraordinarily capable, and because that capability could not be replicated at scale, the nations above it combined comparable individual performance with production depth. Finland could never match. At this point in the countdown, a pattern has emerged worth examining directly. Every nation ranked from 10 through 6 was constrained by the same fundamental problem: scarce resources their doctrines and weapons could not overcome. Italy produced a world-class submachine gun. It could not manufacture in sufficient numbers. Hungary operated with non-standard ammunition inside a disintegrating coalition. Japan confronted a tactical environment its loadout was not designed to serve. Britain carried a structurally unreliable close-quarters weapon into every engagement. Finland demonstrated what elite integration could achieve, and demonstrated equally that elite integration has no substitute for industrial depth. Infantry power is not a weapon, it is a system. And a system is only as strong as the supply chain sustaining it under extended pressure. If you're finding this breakdown useful, consider subscribing. This channel focuses on how wars were actually fought. Not just the weapons, but the systems behind them. The 5 nations that follow possessed what the bottom 5 could not match: industrial capacity to absorb loss, replace equipment, and continue fighting at scale. The gap between entries, from this point forward, is not primarily about what soldiers carried into a single engagement. It is about how long they could keep carrying it and what replaced it when it was gone. Number 5. Soviet Union, the army that learned to build everything. In the Ural mountain factories to which Soviet industry had been evacuated in 1941, a production transformation was underway that would reshape the Eastern Front more decisively than any single engagement. By 1943, those factories were producing weapons faster than opposing forces could destroy them. The Soviet infantry loadout of the mid to late war period was defined by one thing above all others: scale. The Mosin Nagant Model 189130, chambered in 7.62 x 54 mm, remained the standard service rifle. It was a 5-round bolt-action, durable and simple to manufacture, though slower than the Lee Enfield and less accurate than the Kar 98K. The DEG TRV DP-28 light machine gun, fed from a 47-round Pan magazine, gave squads reliable automatic capability that Soviet doctrine employed aggressively. The PPSH-41, chambered in 7.62 Tokarev, was fed from a 71-round drum or a 35-round box. It used stamped steel and a simple blowback action, and its cyclic rate was devastating at close quarters. Soviet industry produced over 6 million PPSH-41s by the end of the war. The PPSH-41's volume meant that by 1943, entire Soviet formations could be equipped with submachine guns, close quarters firepower density no other nation could match at scale. The DP-28 simplicity made field maintenance reliable under extreme cold and sustained tempo. The Mosin Nagant 5-round capacity and bolt-action operation represented a genuine deficit against the M1 Garand. Soviet doctrine compensated through mass. More soldiers, more weapons, faster replacement. But the individual riflemen remained outgunned at the squad level by the armies ranked above. The Soviet Union ranks 5th because production volume and doctrinal integration achieved decisive results while its standard rifle remained structurally inferior to those above it. Number 4. Germany, the most advanced system that couldn't sustain itself. In the defensive fighting of 1944, as German units contracted through France and the Soviet Union simultaneously, infantry sections equipped with the war's most capable individual weapons were increasingly unable to obtain the ammunition to fire them. The German infantry loadout was the most technically advanced of any white nation, and its logistics were collapsing. The Kar 98K chambered in 7.92 x 57mm was the standard Anubis service rifle, a 5-round Mauser bolt action manufactured to exacting tolerances, consistently accurate at 300mm and beyond. The MG42 served as the structural center of German fire doctrine. Belt-fed, 200 rounds per minute, so dominant in suppression that every Allied infantry manual referenced it by name. The MP40 provided 9mm close-quarters capability across a substantial portion of the force. From 1943, the STG-44 introduced selective fire with an intermediate cartridge capable of effective engagement beyond submachine gun range, an advance that influenced every post-war military in the world. The MG42's rate of fire and tactical integration gave German infantry fire superiority that no equivalent automatic weapon could match. The STG-44 represented an individual firepower concept no other nation had operationally deployed. 792mm production could not sustain the MG42's consumption rate under contact. The STG-44 arrived too late and in numbers too limited to re-equip the force systematically. By 1944, German infantry carried the most capable weapons on the battlefield and lacked the production base to use them at full effect. Germany ranks fourth because its loadout represented a genuine ceiling of infantry capability, unreachable, for a nation whose industrial base was under systematic aerial bombardment. Canada at number 3 fielded comparable capability backed by intact growing industry. Number 3, Canada. The Commonwealth system with full industrial depth. In the fighting through the skilled estuary and across the Rhine in 1944 and 1945, Canadian infantry divisions operated with a loadout combining the technical maturity of the British system with production capacity the British homeland could not match alone. The Canadian infantry loadout was the British system at full industrial capacity, without compromise. The Lee Enfield No. 4, Mark I chambered. In 303 British was standard issue, the fastest manual rate of fire of any service rifle in the war. The Brunite machine gun provided squad automatic capability in 303, maintaining ammunition standardization. That made the section logistically coherent. Stents production in Canadian factories met consistent quality standards. The Long Branch Arsenal produced Lee Enfields and Bren guns in volumes, reinforcing Commonwealth formations beyond Canada's own order of battle. Canadian industry operated without interruption. From strategic bombing, providing logistical stability that metropolitan British production intermittently failed to match. Consistent equipment supply through sustained operations was a structural asset that British production at home under resource pressure could not always guarantee. Canadian formations entered the war's final campaigns with intact logistics and no replacement shortfalls. Canada did not field a semi-automatic rifle against the M1 Garand's 8-round semi-automatic capability. The Lee Enfield's bolt-action design, however fast in trained hands, represented a structural disadvantage in the volume of fire an individual rifleman could deliver per minute. Canada ranks on third because it fielded a mature, coherent system at full industrial depth, and because its individual rifle was outclassed by the weapon above it. The United States built around a semi-automatic rifle from the first year of the war, and the implications cascaded through every engagement where American infantry closed with their opponents. Number 2, United States. The semi-automatic standard. In the fighting through the Hurtgen Forest in late 1944 and in the island clearing operations of Iwo and Okinawa in 1945, American infantry sections carried a loadout that gave each individual soldier a rate of firepower no bolt-action force could match. The American infantry loadout was the first to place a semi-automatic rifle in every rifleman's hands as standard issue. Backed by the largest industrial base in the world, the M1 Garand chambered in 3006 Springfield was the standard service rifle. 8-round on-block clip gas operated semi-automatic accurate to 500 meters, with a practical rate of fire estimated at 40 to 50 rounds per minute. The Browning automatic rifle provided squad automatic capability from a 20-round magazine using the same cartridge. The M1A1 Thompson and the M3 submachine gun provided close orders options. Production of the M1 exceeded 5 A5 million rifles by 1945. Ammunition standardization between the Garand and the Bar simplified logistics at every supply level. The Garand's semi-automatic capability multiplied individual firepower at the squad level in a way no bolt-action army could replicate, without fundamental doctrinal restructuring. American logistics never reached a ceiling during the war. The weight of the 3006 cartridge and the NBLC clip's fixed 8-round capacity meant American soldiers carried fewer rounds per pound than German counterparts. The Browning automatic rifle at 20 LB was heavier than the Brin and limited maneuver in close terrain. The clip's audible ejection on the final round was documented as a tactical liability under specific conditions. The United States ranks second because the M1 Garand gave every American infantryman a structural firepower advantage over any bolt-action opponent backed by production infrastructure that never faltered. What sits above it is not a national standard loadout. It is a specialized tactical formation in the Soviet Union developed from Stalingrad's lessons. Number 1. Soviet urban assault loadouts when every soldier became a walking automatic weapon in Stalingrad in the winter of 1942 to 1943, in Budapest through late 1944, and in the reduction of Berlin in April and May of 1945, Soviet assault OSS formations encountered a tactical problem standard rifle doctrine could not solve. The answer was a loadout that eliminated the bolt-action rifleman from the close quarters equation entirely. Late-war Soviet urban assault units were not configured on the standard infantry model. Dedicated assault groups were constituted with PPSH-41 density reaching 1 submachine gun per soldier. The entire tactical burden of close-quarters fighting transferred to a weapon producing over 900 rounds per minute. These formations integrated sappers with demolition charges, anti-tank B teams with RPG-43 grenades, and fire support elements positioned to suppress approaches as assault teams moved. Soviet production was generating PPSH-41s at volumes over 2 million in 1944 alone, making this saturation density tactically and logistically feasible. The system was not improvised. It was doctrine-tested at Stalingrad, codified, and deployed across every major urban operation the Red Army conducted thereafter. The structural logic was simple. In an urban environment where engagements occurred at meters rather than hundreds of meters, accuracy at range was irrelevant. What mattered was volume, rounds per second through a doorway, a stairwell, a basement entrance. Soviet assault groups answered that question with arithmetic no other nation could match. Every other loadout on this list was designed to perform across the full range of infantry combat conditions. The Soviet urban assault formation was designed for one environment, and within that environment, it was structurally unmatched. Nothing in 1945 could generate the volume of automatic fire that a Soviet assault platoon at full PPSH-41 density could put through a doorway in 3 seconds. This ranks first because in the tactical context for which it was designed, no other combination of weapons, doctrine, and production scale could exceed it. If you disagree with this ranking, I want to hear why. Not which rifle you prefer, which system you believe could sustain a war. By 1945, the verdict was already written into the weapons themselves. Bolt-action rifles, the dominant infantry arm of every major power at the war's outset, had not disappeared. They had been progressively displaced by automatic and semi-automatic weapons that armies had not possessed in sufficient quantity at the beginning. The Garand demonstrated that semi-automatic fire could be the standard, not the exception. The PPSH-41 demonstrated that production volume could substitute for doctrinal complexity. The STG-44 pointed toward a future where the distinction between rifle and submachine gun would dissolve into a single intermediate weapon. What this list ultimately demonstrates is not which country produced the best individual weapon. It demonstrates which countries built systems coherent, logistically sustainable, doctrinally flexible, capable of placing effective firepower in soldiers' hands and replacing it when it was lost. Industrial depth determined the ceiling. Doctrinal integration determined whether that ceiling was ever reached. The armies that won were the ones that solved both problems simultaneously.